righty, it is 4:45. I will call the committee of the whole meeting to order. We have one item on the agenda, and as soon as I actually can get it up here, well, we all know what it is. Thank you. Actually, we have two items on the agenda. Mid-biennial budget adjustment, assuming we're starting there, and then on to the legislation. So, Carrie, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Council President Albertson, council members. My name is Carrie Roller. I'm the Finance Administrator, and tonight we'll be providing an overview of the mid-biennial budget adjustments. Typically, we do a mid-biennial budget just to gauge where we're at with revenues. Since we set the biennium on a 2-year period, we'd like to look at it halfway through to make sure that we're on track with the revenues that we set in the budget. We also look to set the property tax levy for next year. So here's a list of the legislation that we will need to adopt throughout this process. The calendar is, we're doing an overview this evening, and then at the council meeting this evening, we have our first of 2 public hearings. The second hearing is next week, and then on October 27th, we will be finalizing the committee report at Finance Committee. That evening, doing the first reading of the ordinance for the budget, and then the second and final reading on November 3rd. We need to make sure that we have the property tax levy set by November 30th. So if we do need extra time, we certainly have some built in there. So for the property tax, this is just a comparison from this year's property tax levy and next year. So next year, property tax levy is going to be about $26.6 million, which is just an increase of the 1% allowed by law. We also have increases for new construction and prior year refunds. That's figures that we get from King County, and they're in the midst of pulling those figures together. So I imagine this number will change slightly, which we will give you an update of the final figure before we adopt legislation on the 27th. But it shouldn't change too much. It should be about 89 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. So what that means for a median residential house in Renton of $722,000, the amount of property tax would be $642, or about $5 more per year. Just as a reminder, the dollar shows that the city receives 9 cents for every dollar spent. I know that many of our residents have seen large increases or have mentioned they've seen large increases for the past years, but those large increases are coming from increases from other taxing jurisdictions, not from the city. The city's proposing no increase other than the allowed 1% and new construction. Here's an overview of the proposed general fund revenue adjustments. I'm proposing to increase the budget revenue by $19.5 million, 10.6 for 2025 and 8.9 for 2026. The 2026 figure does include the $3.5 million for the public safety sales tax that we passed last week. And I'll be going over some of these a little bit more in the next few slides. For the business taxes, the sales taxes are currently trending about 1.3 lower than the prior year figures. When we set the budget last year, I was projecting it to be about 5% lower. So we're doing better than what I had projected. So that's good. We are seeing a decline in our retail sectors, not as much as at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. It has rebounded slightly. We have seen a good increase in service and car sales. So that's actually helped us to continue to stay strong, balancing out those decreases we've seen on the retail sector side. I'm proposing to increase the budget for sales tax by $1 million for each year. For the B&O taxes, this is doing much better than projected too. This is our first year without the tax cap. So it was really hard to project what we would ultimately see for the overall collections. I'm proposing to increase B&O tax by $4 million in 2025 and $3 million in 2026. And the reason it's a little bit lower in 2026 is we've received thus far a little over $1 million in ongoing tax audits, and I don't expect those tax audits to continue, or I don't want to project out that we will have that much more in tax audits going forward. We'll certainly continue to do tax audits, but just as a conservative estimate, just doing $3 million for next year. Utility taxes, we're seeing utility taxes at an increase for utility tax on electricity specifically. It's increased 5% over last year, and when I did my projections, I was only projecting about a 1.5% increase, so increasing $2 million each year for utility tax to account for that increase in electric utility tax. Our investment earnings are doing great as well. When we set the budget last year, I had anticipated 3 interest rate cuts in 2025. We've only had 1 thus far, and it was just last month. So we're doing a great job at investing our money. I'm proposing to increase our revenues for investment earnings 3 million this year and 1 million next year, because I do anticipate having some cuts in the next 12 months. This is a nice picture of our portfolio and what we've earned over the quarter. That solid blue line is our blended rate, which tracks most closely with the federal funds rate. So you can see we dipped just below 4% at the end of last year. Some other revenue adjustments for the general fund is I'm proposing to increase gambling tax 500,000 just for this year. We did have a gambling establishment close in 2025, so holding next year's adjustment at this time. Permit fees increasing 500,000. We've seen permit fees go up this year, and if interest rates go down, I expect the permit fees to be even higher next year, but holding off on adjusting anything for next year at this time. Grants, we've had some grants that we've received since our last budget adjustment by about 400,000, and then increasing next year for the property tax levy that the public safety sales tax levy that we passed last week by $3.5 million for next year. Some decreases that I'm proposing are fines and penalties to go down 750,000 for both years. This relates to our red light camera and our school zone camera, and we've seen a decline in infractions issued by about 10% per year, so decreasing the revenues for fines and penalties. I'm also proposing to decrease charges for services of 200,000 in 2026, and that relates to the proposed discontinuation of the electronic home detention program. On the expenditure side of the general fund, I am proposing to increase expenditures for 2025 by $15.3 million, and most of that is for a capital transfer of $13 million for the parks property purchase over by the community center. I'm also proposing to increase a transfer to our reserves of $1.5 million each year. We're required to have 12% in our reserves, 12% of our general fund costs in our reserves, and as our general fund costs go up, so does that reserve requirement. I also mentioned earlier this year that industry standard suggests that we have our reserves closer to 17%. So I'm also just trying to dial that up slowly over the next couple of years to get us closer to that industry standard of 17%, which is about two months worth of costs. We also proposing next year a $3.2 million increase for the public safety sales tax. We will be coming back to council at the beginning of next quarter to talk about holistically how we plan to spend that money. But since I did allocate the revenue side, I also wanted to put a placeholder in there for the expenditure side. We have some staffing changes, $1.9 million, which I'll go over in the next couple of slides. And then a decrease of $200,000 for the electronic home detention program. The electronic home detention program costs about $200,000 for the operational costs and about $380,000 for the 2 non-commissioned positions within the police department. So those decrease of those 2 non-commissioned positions is included in that $1.9 million staffing figure that you see up top. In total, this program costs the city about $600,000 per year. I know there was a lot of questions and concerns last week, so I wanted to expand a little bit more about why this change. We're one of the last cities to have this program in-house. This is not a program that's exclusive to government, and there's private providers that are available for this program. There was a question last week at council as to which owner cities at SCORE outsource this or has this in-house. We did confirm that all of the owner cities at SCORE do outsource this program. The facts are that we continue to spend a significant amount of money annually, and it's more efficient to not have this in-house. Between the equipment rental and the staffing, it's about $600,000. And in the last few years, we've actually been able to supplement that cost by having some ILAs with some other cities where we haven't had to recognize as much of a loss because we've had some contracts with them. So we did mention that ongoing, it's about $300,000 to $350,000 the program's losing year over year because we did have those contracts with some other cities. The other concern that I had not mentioned last week at the council meeting is that we just are not able to collect for these home monitoring fees. We're at a 20% collection rate, very, very small collection rate. In fact, our outstanding receivables are over 500,000 for this program, and they're on track to be closer to 550,000 by the end of the year. And so these are services that we've provided that we just have not been able to collect or may not collect at all. And so when we're talking about a receivable balance that's continuing to increase, that doesn't look good on our financial statements. Meaning when we go out to bond or borrow money, that could be called into question about why we have a receivable balance that's growing. And it also could impact our bond rating if this is showing some of that. So when we combine the loss from the uncollectible as well as the ongoing costs, this is something that we're recommending at this time to discontinue this program. Some of the proposed staffing changes that we have in place, we're looking to add a code compliance manager and an assistant building official. Both of these positions would report to the building official. I know that there's been an increase in need with this group, and we feel it's warranted to add some additional management support. We're also looking to replace or convert an open administrative secretary position in community economic development to an engineering specialist. Another change is to what I already mentioned, to remove the 2 non-commissioned positions within the police department. For Parks and Recreation, with the Resource Center coming on board, we'd like to add a Human Services Director position and remove the Human Services Manager position. The Director position will be taking on all the current tasks of the manager. However, this person will also be an added assignment of community outreach, providing support and direct support to the community, going into the community, making connections, and making sure that we're getting people in touch with the services that they're looking for. Also for Parks and Recreation, we're looking to remove the museum manager position. That's a position that's currently vacant, and replacing it with a recreation supervisor. So it's a little bit more in line with their line of business for Parks and Recreation. Finally, there's a need to add an additional prosecuting attorney and a paralegal. Both of these positions would qualify for the public safety sales tax we just passed last week. And as I mentioned, we plan to come back to council with a holistic approach on how to use this new resource. And at this time, we would like to ask to allocate 350,000 of that for these 2 positions because there is an immediate need right now in the city's attorney's office for these positions. The other piece of the changes for the salaries that we were showing is the non-represented salary study. So we had mentioned last year and the beginning of this year that we were looking to do a salary study for our non-represented group. We hired an external consultant to do this work. A salary study has not been performed on the non-represented group holistically. There's been some pockets that have been looked at, but we really wanted to make sure that we looked at this group in total. The goal was to use market to set all non-represented pay at or above the market average. And through this process, we were able to reduce some of our pay grades. We had 53 pay grades, and we reduced them to 32. We also looked at compression. So made sure that those that were non-represented positions that were supervising, they were plus or minus 10% with the subordinates they manage. We used 10 cities similar to us to do the market, and we used the market average of the highest paid cities to set the new pay grades. What we found is that the wages were much lower than the comparable cities, and so the proposed change with the salary study would increase next year's budget by $1.5 million, and in 2027 it would be an increase of 2.2. And it would max out at the top amount of 2.7 by 2030. Unfortunately, we have not been paying a reasonable wage for this group, and for quite some time, it's really impacted our ability to attract and retain good people. When staff leave for a neighboring city for better pay, the city not only loses a good employee, but really loses that level of knowledge and understanding, which has a cost in itself. So I feel comfortable with being able to support these additional costs, mainly because we've seen an increase in some of the revenues as well. Here's a picture of the long-range forecast. Just remember this long-range forecast is the most conservative in nature, meaning that we budget the expenditures at 100%. So as if all of our positions were 100% filled. And when we're looking at just the biennium figures for 25 and 26, the operating costs are either at a slight surplus or about break even. We do not have to look at dipping into fund balance until out 2 years. Even then, as we project out into the future, it's harder to project some of the figures. So I'm not really concerned about using a little bit each year, mainly because we have a nice fund balance to be able to lean on. And a lot of times as we're looking forward, we end up the year a little bit better than we initially project. One thing I wanted to note, I noticed that the percentages aren't listed at the bottom. So even when we project out to 2031, we're still within that 12% amount that we try to shoot for. We're at 30% by 2031 of the general fund costs. So still very healthy. Some other fund adjustments, the other fund adjustments that we have are mainly to capital. Again, where we're looking to increase the budget for the parkland acquisition that you all have already approved. We're also looking to add to the budget for the Legacy Square Phase 2 project. We have several transportation projects that we're adding to the budget: Oakdale Avenue, Southwest 43rd Street, and a sound transit hawk signal. For surface water, we're looking to add a pump station at Rainier Avenue in Oakdale, and then Taxiway Alpha Rehab project at the airport's another big one. We're also proposing to remove a special capital fund. We added a special capital fund in 2017 for the Family First Community Center. We wanted a special capital fund to be able to accumulate all of those costs for that project. Since that project is complete, we no longer need this capital fund, so we're proposing to remove that fund. We're proposing to also increase the garbage disposal fees. The fees are just a little bit higher than we originally projected. And then I think we all probably feel this one as well. Fleet fuel costs is much higher than we had projected, so we're needing to increase our budget for fuel as well as some repairs and maintenance within fleet. Along with the budget adjustment, we also asked council to approve some fee schedule changes. We just have a few this time. We're looking to change or increase the golf course green fees. And then we have a few fees we collect on behalf of other agencies. We're looking to increase the fire impact fees as mentioned by the RRFA, as well as the school district impact fees. They actually have reduced to 0. So reducing those down per the school district's directions. So some actions that need to be accomplished to set this budget is we need to set the property tax levy for 2026. We just need to communicate that to King County by the end of the month in November. We will be adopting the budget legislation and adopting a fee schedule. And I know that was a lot of numbers and a lot of information, and I'm open to any questions you have. I do have all department administrators here with me this evening as well that we can pull on and answer any questions that you may have.
All righty. I thought maybe they had nothing better to do, but okay. Questions, Councilmember O'Halloran.
Yeah, maybe I missed this right at the beginning, but on this sheet that was attached in the materials, it says that the property tax revenue adjustment goes down $500,000 in 2026.
We're just truing up. So last year when we set the budget for 2026, we set an estimate. And so based on the figures that we're getting from King County, it's going to have to go down from what we originally budgeted.
What else? Councilman O'Halloran.
And then on the expenditures, the $13 million here for the community center acquisition, is that the resource center?
That's for the land purchase over by the community center.
Okay.
And so what happens is we're transferring $13 million from the general fund to the capital fund, and then the rest of it's within the capital fund already.
Okay, so we don't have the resource center in here. On Lind?
That was budgeted, I believe, at Q2. Or, wait a minute, the resource center on Lind.
On East Valley.
Oh, yeah, I think we budgeted that in Q2 budget adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you. I'm interested in the non-represented salary study. Is there a way that we could see that or get a little more details on it? Because the slide was very broad. Would we be able to have that emailed to us?
I believe that there is a sheet in front of you that has some of the details.
Just have this one in front of me. I think
Yes.
that Valerie actually may have more.
No, this is.
Yeah, that's it.
And that shows what currently each position is making and what the market was, and then what we're proposing to increase it to.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I have a question, Carrie, as a minor one, but on the decreases, the fines and penalties, the 750,000. I know it's not, it's not huge or anything, but you said it's because of the red light cameras and the school cameras. Is that, you said less infractions because people were actually abiding by the law, or were cameras removed, or
No
just?
cameras, yeah, no cameras were removed. People are just abiding by the law. They know that they're there and they're serving its purpose.
Okay,
Mhm.
fair enough. Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you. I appreciate this very much. Thank you so very much. When it comes to adding the 2 positions overall, and this is a little bit more nuanced, and so please forgive me because I don't have the exact name of the position, but I believe, I think it was Hannah Bonmiller who had a position when before we reorganized with the EHHS, and I see MJ in the back there, so maybe she's able to help us. And that position got moved over to CED. Has that position been filled yet? And I know I'm getting really in the way, that's why I'm curious.
I believe that's in CED now.
Yes.
And I believe that we converted that position to,
I see them whispering in the back. I think they know.
yes, it has been filled.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, and for just for clarity's sake, I mean, I know what it is. Maybe everybody else knows what it is. Can you, maybe for the record, can you explain the concept of compression? You kind of did something really quickly, but I think it's important to understand that, to explain it like I'm a 5-year-old, if you will. I mean,
I'm gonna let David Topaz do that.
oh, he just couldn't wait. All right, Dave,
Yeah.
it's your time.
Hi, Dave Topaz, HR administrator. The easiest way to explain it would be making sure that there's a reasonable spread between a subordinate and their supervisor and their manager, which is something that our bargaining units bargain for in each contract to make sure, say, a sergeant makes more than a police officer, and there's a certain spread from the top step to the top step. And so we analyzed that to make sure that there was a reasonable spread between, say, a principal civil engineer and a utility engineering manager. Does that make sense?
Yes, and just to go a little bit further, can you explain how it ends up that way? Because some people I know don't necessarily know how it gets to that point. It's like, well, hold on a second, why did the salaries get so close? So just the process of how compression actually happens.
A couple different ways. The first one is that our bargaining units bargain their labor agreements, and in those agreements, we may agree to a certain raise this year that the non-represented person who's their manager isn't getting the equivalent. They're only getting, say, 3% when the line person was getting 5%. So it happens over time, repeatedly, if that occurs. Another way is when we create new positions in the past, if we created new positions and new pay grades, we may not have been taking that into account. In other words, we want to keep this person as a manager, and we create a pay grade that pays $5,000 more, but that's still only like 6% ahead of the person that they supervise.
Okay.
If I could also add, we have done some salary studies already for the union groups. We just have not done one from the non-represented group. And so that's why it's really important that we do this for this group as well. Because what's happened is we did a large one back in 2024 for the ASME union, and we ended up having quite a bit of compression from those adjustments. And so now it's time to really look at the next group to make sure that we can handle some of that compression.
very much for that. Any other questions? Oh, Councilman, were you just scratching the chin? Yes, you do have? No, okay. Councilman Rivera.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate that explanation. Thank you, Council President Albertson.
Mhm.
And thank you both. Again, it's a great presentation. I always appreciate how fiscally conservative and informed that you are and how you explain everything. I do appreciate it. So thank you so much. So if I'm to understand with the non-represented salary study, are we working towards in this particular sheet here? Are we working, which column are we working towards when we're trying to see the increase for some of these non-salary positions?
I think the easiest column would be the far right column, which indicates where they're ending up in the market. So our goal was to make sure that all of our non-reps are at or above the market average, inclusive of their 4% deferred comp contribution. And you can see those numbers range typically between 50 and 61% of the market. So our goal is to make sure everybody was over. As it turns out, when we did the survey, we had better than 60% of these being between 1% and 15% behind the market. So they would have been in the 35 to 50 range. So we make sure everybody's 50 and above, inclusive of their 4%.
I really appreciate that and completely agree with all of that. So thank you so very, very much.
Any other questions? I have one last two-part question. The golf course green fees, is that, when you look at it in line with, does that put them in line with some of the other area golf course fees? Maplewood has always been one of the ones that's one of the best values out there, but
It still continues to be one of the best values, yes.
okay. And I said a two-part question. Can I lock in my old fees? No. Okay, any other? Yes, Councilmember Rebecca.
Thank you so very much. I was actually going to ask that question as well to see if there was kind of a grandfather rate that we could get locked into, but I
Right.
thank you for covering that. When I'm looking at, again, all of this great information, and I really appreciate everything that has been presented here today, so am I to understand that we are going to be ultimately firing 2 Renton police officers, non-commissioned? I know we'd like to clarify that, though I don't believe there's much of a difference in terms of workload when it comes to commissioned versus non-commissioned. I think a police officer and a Renton PD officer, the Renton PD officer, commissioned or non-commissioned, we're just going to leave that there. But we're going to be firing 2 while adding 2 new positions and giving very much due raises to some of our leaders who are deserving of these raises. Am I to understand that correctly?
Yes, we're removing the 2 electronic home detention program positions. That is our proposal. We're looking to add a few positions to CED as well as City Attorney's Office, and we're looking to increase the salaries for some non-represented staff.
Thank you.
All right, nothing else. Thank you, Carrie. Now this second item on the agenda, legislation, are we doing anything with that? That's just for our general.
That's just for your information. It's just
Okay.
a draft legislation that will be passing on the 27th.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, hey, I guess that's it. So committee of the whole meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.